Aloha and welcome to all of you joining us today. I hope that you are just as excited as I am to be here. And while I have said it before, today's panel is absolutely amazing and without any doubt will be thought-provoking. So before we start, here are a couple of housekeeping items. Be aware that this panel discussion is being recorded. We will make the recording available to all of those who have RSVP'd. And for those of you that are crashing this Zoom meeting, just let us know if you would like to be added to the list of recipients. Please share all of your comments and questions for our panelists by typing them into the chat box. We have allocated about 20 minutes at the end of this conversation and look forward to hearing your thoughts. About the event, this is the 4th year of the hosting of our art, architecture, and design panel. And our goal is and has been to bring together thought leaders and visionaries in the fields of art, architecture, and design. Topics in the past have covered resiliency, changes in how we learn, historic future, cultural design, just to name a few. Today's panel is exciting, not only for the topic of cities of the future, but also for the prominence and caliber of the panelists that are joining me here today. We are truly honored to have with us the 4 following panelists. Rick Longiardi, the mayor of the city and county of Honolulu. Derek Choi, who is the Northeast Region Pacific Practice Leader at architecture firm Gensler. Derek is a local boy, a Maryknoll graduate, and joins us today from Boston, where he now lives with his family. Georgia Skinner, she is the Chief Officer of DBED, that's Hawaii State Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism's Creative Industries Division, as well as the founder of its Creative Lab. And last but not least, Daniel Sunderland, a fellow European. Daniel is a partner with architecture firm Bjarke Ingels Group, also known as BIG, and he is joining us from New York. I wish I could ask the audience to join me in a round of applause to welcome you in a traditionally appropriate fashion. And I'm sorry that this proves challenging, but I would like you to know that I wholeheartedly thank you for being here. So, okay, we have created short introductory videos of each of our panelists that we would like to share with you now. Rachel?
Well, I'm very biased when it comes to Honolulu because, first of all, I was privileged enough to find myself here in 1965 as an 18-year-old. And so ever since then, I've always felt that I was a very fortunate person to be invited to a very special party. That said, the cultural diversity of our people and everything about that is what resonates with me, aside from its physical beauty. And the combination of both of those together makes it very, very special. Going back to my youth, it really had a lot to do with Larry Price, who was my football coach at the University of Hawaii, and the decisions he made regarding me, and starting out with my being starting inside linebacker on the team, to years later inviting me back to coach with him after I was coaching back at the University of Connecticut, and then promoting me on the staff and those kinds of things. I think that did so much to sort of redirect where my life was headed at the time. And so I think in many ways that was one of the most impactful things that happened. It was a series of events over a few years, all related to who I was at the time, between being a player and college football coach. Well, I think what excites me right now is the potential of things to come, and really, quite honestly, all at the same time, the challenge to make that happen. But the team of men and women that agreed to come in and join me in running this city, an unprecedented amount of leadership talent, an infusion of intellectual capital and determination and grit, is very inspiring. The scale and scope of responsibility in this job, because of what's at stake for so many, in my lifetime is unprecedented. And the desire not to let people down or disappoint and to come through for them and be who we're supposed to be is very exciting.
The world's largest design firm. So, from the countless people from around the world, we understand that, with this sort of impact and footprint comes a huge responsibility. And we are really dedicated to making the places that we live, work, and play more inspiring, inclusive, and resilient. My first internship in an architectural practice, I thought I was working on a skyscraper. I thought I was going to be doing cool office towers in New York City. And on day one, I walk in and they say, well, the great news is you're here. Congratulations. The bad news is that project that we thought we were going to assign you to, it's not there. It's not happening at all, by the way. But we have an awesome project for you. You're going to be working on an airport. And I've just been hooked on designing airports and infrastructure for the last 25 years. The work that we do is truly impactful. And the work that we do in infrastructure, transit, and transit-oriented development really tells important stories about places, about communities, and a shared history. And I do think that the work we do in mobility is about building the infrastructure of opportunity. And I think every airport, every piece of infrastructure, every hard project is screaming for this opportunity to be transformative in a very meaningful and sustainable way. Everyone's flying to the moon, right? Everyone's just doing their thing. So the only thing that's holding us back is really the courage to go big. And I think that's the most exciting thing for me when I think about the future. It's just, how high do I want to jump? And how high do we all want to jump together?
Of industries within the Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism is really what I would call a startup within government. It was born in 2003 and now has matured to a point where we're really seeing a lot of the seeds that we planted coming to fruition. Collaborating with community as well as other agencies within the state and city and counties across the state. It's really rewarding. My passion is about how can I elevate the stories of our creative people in the state, their value, the business component of why the creative sector is so critical. The arts is something that's important to everyone. It's about our well-being, and especially in Hawaii, it's our culture and the arts together that build the foundation for a strong creative economy in the state. A major influence for me in my life was my father. And he grew up with polio, unfortunately. And so he had a handicap growing up, but he never let that define him or get in his way. His drive to do the creative things he did in the business of sound and sound engineering is what really fueled my passion to go into the film and entertainment industry when I was young. What excites me the most about the future, especially here for Hawaii and where we are in the middle of the Pacific, is that we have the opportunity to craft not only an innovation-based environment, but equity for all people that really need to be able to move into the technological area. And we've seen more and more of that, I think, across the state, really envisioning a new way to work together with community professionals and attract the people that come here to stay and be respectful of our environment, at the same time being able to design things that are really based on nature but are created in a way that help the whole community and not just a few.
So the Danish word for design is form giving, which literally means to give form to that which has not yet taken shape. In other words, to give form to the future. So using our power to give form rather than allowing the future to take shape is more important now than ever. We like to see every project as a human-made ecosystem. Essentially, we're trying to create new kind of relationships within the built environment and connecting the built environment in new ways. And by doing so, not only increase the performance of design, architecture, and urbanism, but also increase the experience. The biggest influence on me is the conversations I have with the stakeholders in the projects I'm involved in. I really love when these great dialogues result in a discovery that reveals something unexpected or sometimes something brilliant. I think for the first time now and in the recent years, we have access to an incredible amount of information, and we will be able to do more and more informed decisions. And as a designer, we now have tools that can give us feedback in real time. And then, of course, also we have the opportunity to more seamlessly collaborate with other people around the world. So that's also something that I'm really excited about to think about. Instead of the Renaissance man or woman, you have the Renaissance community of people and knowledge that in a way will be necessary to resolve the big challenges that we have ahead of us.
Again, a warm welcome to all of you. And without much further ado, let's get started. As citizens, we have grown to expect dependability, safety, and healthy places to work and live in. Additionally, almost all of us thrive in dynamic and engaging places. Cities need to work well. Recently, the World Policy Journal stated that by the year 2050, 7 out of 10 humans will live in cities. So here's a question I'd like to ask all of you. From your perspective, what are the top 5 innovations for making cities smarter and ultimately more livable? Let's, in no particular order, start with Derek.
All right. So we got to go quickly, right? So I did want to start by saying that I think cities are fundamentally one of our greatest inventions. So we are arguably richer, smarter, greener, more resilient, and healthier as cities. And I think they are already pretty darn smart. So we're in a really good place to begin with. I do think that there are, in my mind, these 5 things that we want to think about now, particularly in the context of where we are today. One, which I think we've all touched on, is inclusivity by design. We really have an incredible opportunity with all the data that we've been talking about, and all of the opportunities to connect with our stakeholders and our communities. Things are changing fast. And I also think we now have a lot of investments that we're seeing in local underrepresented women and minority-owned businesses that we haven't seen in a generation. So when we think about inclusivity in design, I think this is one of these greatest gifts that we're getting. And I do think when we started talking earlier, we talked about what do we do with the city, downtowns, and all these sort of city centers that we've been thinking about traditionally. I do think that the emergence of a new typology is coming together, and I would call it the neighborhood hub. We call it now the 15-minute city. I think in my office, we call it the 20-minute city. So I think these are some of these interesting evolutions right now as you think about the demise of the city center, so to speak. Last 3 things that I want to think about is the ever more disruptive mobility factor. I think traditional transportation, and Bettina, I'm going to use that word now. Traditional transportation as we know of it is really going to be changing fast, and you're all seeing it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Health and wellness is one item that is absolutely transforming the way we think about our cities. And last but not least, I think our ability to be resilient as communities will define our success as emerging or smarter cities. So those are my 5 topics.
Awesome. Thanks, Derek. Mayor, would you like to go next?
Sure. It's a very thought-provoking question. First of all, Patina, thank you for this opportunity, and to Pia for extending the invitation. I'm already humbled by the quality of the other panelists, but I'll try to make my own contributions today. Without denigrating Honolulu at all, but I would tell you that coming into office only 7 months ago, the first assessment was that, we were in the second year of the 21st century, the third decade, and the city was not in sync with that. The third decade, the second year of the third decade, I'm sorry, I misstated that. And so what were those things that we would address? And actually, to my surprise, a couple of sectors were a little bit further ahead than I thought, but clearly modernizing the city and making it smarter, even though it's not on our hit list of things to do, is definitely, along with the rebuild of the economy as a result of COVID, is what we're focused on. So, one of the things I've been really intrigued with is machine learning. And our head of information technology has been really good, and we're actually training software right now to read handwriting, and they're really good at this. And so right now we're in a position where we can read 15 documents per second. All kinds of forms and stuff like that. But we're actually developing this neural network, and we're investing in it. And that'll probably become 1,000 times faster. And I think about the processing and the backlog, knowing that we don't have enough people and staff to be able to do this administratively, I think is going to be very cool and very hip. And we're going to push on that a lot, on that technological advancement. The second thing is sort of what Derek just said. I mean, our transportation infrastructure. And for those more familiar with Honolulu, I'm the 4th mayor to touch the rail project, which is hated by some, loved by many, created a lot of other emotions for a lot of others, but we're determined to see this project through. And I've had some really good meetings recently with the FTA, and we've done some stuff, but getting ready for autonomous vehicles and the things that we're doing and our complete streets programs and stuff like that, and just adding to the quality of life in the urban core is something that we're really involved in as well. And we could talk about that and everything that will come with that, with transit-oriented development and access, et cetera. And Patina, to your comments about looking at what we define as urban core and what is to come in the future, the concentration of people, and how we're going to meet those demands. We're also in the business of setting up right now, and this is one of the areas where we're behind in, but I think we can create a ubiquity is in our use of wireless broadband. We don't even have the north side connected, right? The west side, rather. We can't even control the traffic lights at this point outside on the west side, which is becoming, with Kapolei, and I know that Daniel's probably not familiar with Oahu so much, but Derek, you're from here. By the way, nice to see a guy in Boston wearing an Aloha shirt. You gotta love it, because I grew up in Cambridge, as I think I said in the video. But anyway, that idea of creating ubiquity, with broadband and connectivity is an absolute must. I mean, and we see that, and that's one of the things that often gets overlooked about building of the rail. We're gonna put in hundreds, if not thousands, of wireless cable into the rail system, which is coming on. I mean, there's so many things that it does beyond just the transportation that we're getting done. So, and then we're into, and this is the area that I'm probably less versed on, but the electrical microgrids, because we just have that ability. And so our guys, I'm really pleased that they're really in touch with that. That, as I said at the outset, before we started the formal show, it's a really steep learning curve for me. I didn't know about electrical microgrids, but I'm seeing what their capabilities are, and it's something we want to do. And I think the last thing is video analytics. We're doing a lot on that. I came to this job, a 40+ year career in media, and I thought I knew a little bit about it, but the whole potential of video analytics is really exciting. So that's where we are in the top 5 things.
Awesome. Thank you. Georgia, would you mind going next?
Sure. What a great dialogue already. You know, for I think our state and looking at some of the things we were talking about in prep for this wonderful panel today really come to mind. Along with the design comments that you've heard already from Derek and Daniel, I think that our ability to look at how Hawaii operated in past as an ahupua'a system, does that have relevance? And so can we look at Indigenous opportunities within design, especially within architecture, and more of that collaborative kind of thing? I think that that's important. So it's not just simply having pictures on the wall that represent you know, in hotels or other structures that are refurbished, for example, but really how do we shape and continue that as it's an important part of Hawaii 2.0. The other is obviously the digital equity and the importance of broadband, Wi-Fi, broadband, hardwired, all of it, because if we don't have that, technology is moving so quickly that we are going to leave behind a lot of our rural areas. And that's a very important part, as I know, is important to both the city and county and the state. I would say also for neighbor islands, just because I am a neighbor island person, that it's all about how our clusters in those towns work together. So a little bit different kind of design challenge. And one of the other things that I noted in I guess it was a National Geographic kind of grid of what does the city of the future look like? We already have a lot of these assets. I mean, we have the opportunity to put on top of our roofs a community market for a housing project that might be in Chinatown, for example. You know, is there an opportunity for that produce to then go right down to our vendors in Chinatown? Those kind of things, and also building with empathy. Empathy is a very important part of where we go in the 21st century. And I think this pandemic has showed that to all of us. It's very clear that, as I think Bettina said earlier, you know, what if, you know, with your offices downtown, how is AHL going to be able to continue if we are working so many of us remotely? And you'll miss that energizing factor of the wonderful restaurants and the people that you interact with in an urban core. And then I just have one last comment, and that's Kaka'ako. Okay, so that is a wonderful example of a hub that's actually working, and some of the things that our powwow and other artists that have done collaboratively from the very beginning before construction from Howard Hughes. I think you see it and touch it at the Entrepreneur Sandbox in all of the small shops and artisans there. And believe me, the world is taking notice. That's the benefit and the bright light that shone through in the pandemic. Being able to market the things that are here from Hawaii, you know, globally through broadband without people having to leave home. So I'm excited about where it goes and looking forward to engaging more with our architects and our designers in the community.
Oh, perfect. So do we. Daniel, please.
Yes, it's going to be hard to follow up on all these brilliant ideas. And we're definitely on the same wavelength. But no, I was just thinking about a few things. Obviously, a lot of topics were covered here, but coming back to the shared street, I think that's really key to make sure that people can feel comfortable and feel like the urban room in a way is theirs, and not only for moving and parking cars. And then, of course, when you think about the street, it's really a collaboration between the private and the public sector. So where I hope to see a lot of innovation in the next couple of years is really in terms of programming the ground floor, programming buildings in a way that people feel like there are things happening, you feel safer. You know, that in the end, that's what makes a neighborhood a neighborhood. And then, of course, also looking at at the public spaces and parks that I think have the opportunity to serve so many different purposes, more than just being an enjoyable destination, but also actually become infrastructure in terms of creating water basins for storm events, or creating ecologies or home for different type of ecologies. So that I see as something that somehow need to happen, but also a very exciting future. And then finally, from my end at least, I want to do a shout out to roofs. I do think roofs have been very undervalued in the last couple of years, and I think roofs are such an incredible asset. And what I also think that means is that you can use a roof to harvest energy. You can use a roof to gather water. You can use a roof to grow your food. And I think that in the future, hopefully we will see more roofs. And perhaps that would also change the proportions of our cities and our future, from tall spires to more human scale neighborhoods that actually can sustain themselves.
Oh, this is terrific.
That's
Thank
so good.
So what we're hearing here is that a city is more than a place or geography. It's a home. In many ways, it's a lab. It's where culture and ideas come together, and ultimately that shapes us as residents. So another question for all of you, and don't worry, Daniel, we're going to go the other way. With so many challenges to tackle right now, how can we have, or do we have, the courage and the capacity to imagine the future? What can we do to make the start? I mean, in many ways, how do we eat that elephant? Daniel, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. No, but I do think at this point in time, what I think is really exciting is somehow that a lot of different agendas are aligning. Both social, technological, and environmental agendas. So I do see that you have these opportunities to, through innovation, creating very kind of disruptive and interesting futures that can affect a lot of people. What I found really interesting about that is that we also have very clear challenges to focus on, and as I mentioned before, perhaps more tools than ever to deal with those challenges, and in a way change, disrupt, and hopefully contribute to a better place. And I do think you literally almost anyone can engage in this process in different ways. And my country fellow Greta Thunberg, I mean, what she had done kind of is incredible, kind of raising the agenda and really making this her mission, but also the impact. So I'm optimistic. I do think we have so many different ways to contribute and be a part of the conversation.
Definitely. Thank you. My daughter called me Greta Thunberg earlier today, and I think she meant it as an insult, and I could not have imagined a greater compliment.
Thank you, dear. But I think, yes, I mean, I think that what's very interesting is that, where do you start? And so the nibble at the elephant that I see at the moment is that a lot of the work that the governor's office, HIEMA, the planning for the state really initiative of Hawaii 2.0 involves things such as looking at where do we have wonderful community hubs already, our libraries. So why not work with libraries who already had the first round of broadband installed, upgrade that, and then be able to make those real, not only just research hubs, but starting small entrepreneurial business hubs by creating parklets outside of them, which then allow landscape architects who might be in college to, in that region, work together with the designers and things to make that work. So a lot of the work that we're doing right now, I think, addresses this. And the other is, rather than only having, for example, large, big buildings that we need, we are also affected by climate change in Hawaii. So I think there is a need for us to have more substantial shelters in the state built. And with all of the federal money coming down, is there not an opportunity to do that may be adjacent to a food manufacturing facility or something of that nature? Mm-hmm. So those are just two ideas. And again, love that the rail line has much more to it underneath than those people might suspect in the community. That's such a great part of the infrastructure that I think is really important. So yeah, developing more creative entrepreneurs regionally as opposed to just Oahu is a big mission of creative industries, and also I think a big mission of our department and States 2.0. Mm-hmm. So those are two practical nibbles. Okay.
I wanted to build off of your comment about our building stock, and I think when you think about taking those little baby steps, and I want to go backtrack a little bit, Bettina, when we first talked about policy, we tend to be very punitive when we think about sustainability. But as we think about carbon sequestration and how do you deal with a carbon neutral future, I think we have so many areas of innovation, and this is where I think innovation and policy will start to come together. When you think about infrastructure and the buildings that we create, that generate 2/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions in this country alone, it is impossible to not think that policy can start to come into play when you can start to incentivize development, and you can start to get folks to remember that the greenest buildings are the ones you don't have to build at all. So internally, as a sort of business model, we've initiated a commitment to be basically carbon neutral in the next 10 years with our work. This will take a lot of work in terms of partnering with our clients, as well as our business partners, to really understand what is the value of this. How do you actually make money out of this? And that sort of balance of operational carbon, which is basically obviously on the airport side, it's very obvious. We're contributing to probably 75% of the operational carbon in our infrastructure systems. But as you start to think about ways to really kind of pull this together, there are just incredible opportunities to incentivize adaptive reuse, to really think about innovative materials. And these are the baby steps. So when you think about being able to make that impact, it is from respective companies. All of you guys have incredible commitments to the 2030 challenge. With our clients, which represent quite a number of blue chip clients, we've been working on dashboards to think about how is it when you think about the 5, 10, 15 million square feet of development, that all of these folks have in their portfolios. What is that one decision when it comes to reducing steel? We're thinking about, a significant material change could impact the way a company does business and influences the entire community. And Daniel's company is doing incredible stuff with Google as we all are collaborating. And these are the clients who are pushing us, all the way to how do you connect to my employees, literally from their doorsteps to the jetway, right? Every step of the way, how do we transform that working environment by making these critical decisions when it comes to carbon? So these are just little things that could have an incredible impact.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very true. I like your comment about materials too.
Yes.
Very, very difficult to achieve here in Hawaii because everything needs to be shipped or flown in.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a big challenge, which doesn't mean that it can't be overcome. But good point. Mr. Mayor, we skipped you. I am sorry.
Okay. Well, you didn't skip me. I'm listening and I'm learning as I selfishly. You know, I liked a couple of the words that Daniel used with respect to courage and being disruptors. You know, and so when we talk about modernizing the city, you know, my thought of that has a lot to do with technology first and foremost, perhaps, but also innovation in partnerships. And the innovation really is that intellectual capital. And I think Georgia and all of you may acknowledge, and we've even been on this call today, we have that in abundance, but do you have the courage to lead, to make the kinds of decisions? And so, you know, we came into this administration, we brought in 40 new leaders. Right off the bat, that was innovative, okay? We brought in 22 out of 25 new directors, and then I let them hire their deputies, which was unprecedented, and they brought in 18 more of people that many of whom they had applied, because we went through a really rigorous hiring procedure, that we would have maybe hired them in the first round. That's how strong the deputies are, because these people don't personally recruit them. Many of them came from the private sector. All of them took big pay cuts. We brought in more than 40 leaders at the same time. We all got sworn in on January 2nd. That to me was a statement, our opening statement about we're not here to perpetuate the status quo. And it's not to denigrate anything that's gone on in the past, but the last thing we want to do is perpetuate, the status quo. So we're about change right now and looking at the long term and short term. And we've got things on our immediate short horizon. You know, building rail, which is a transformative project, is one thing, and it's exciting because so much comes with that. It is a 21st century play. We know that. And that's why we're so committed to it on so many levels. But there are a lot of other issues that we're looking at here in the urban core with respect to affordable housing, you know, and quite honestly, and I know, and look, I have a background involved with climate change for a long time. It was one of the last things I did before I left my media background was authorize and raise the money to do 3 documentaries on it. As island dwellers, you know, I would tell you we're especially sensitive to that because of the reality of it, and we need to pay attention to it, and we are, and there are things that we're going to do in shifting from a policy-making organization to adaptation. We've already done some things. We've already signed on a couple of agreements with the Army Corps of Engineers. We've rekindled after it was shuttled on the LOI flood mitigation project, but there are other projects we're looking at doing, both engaging the military, because as a major corporation, if you will, for us, there's a lot of resource there and opportunity for us. I mean, George alluded earlier about national monies, infrastructure monies or whatever coming, and we'll see what that represents. But we're trying to take on as many partners as possible and to listen to those ideas and to act on those ideas. I think that one of the things that most of us bring, hopefully coming into the job from the private sector, none of us are politicians. And I can tell you on the threshold of my 75th birthday, I'm not in this job to build a political career. I came in here to serve this community. I've lived here since 1965, as I said in the video earlier, but it's about serving the public. And so we walked in the midst of a pandemic when times were really tough, and there was nothing there that we wanted to hold on to. We just said, you know, let's figure it out on a going forward basis. So we stay open to the new ideas. And just because, and I've challenged this group, one of the things I've learned early on, there's a lot of stuff that was just going to kick down the road, not by the private administration, by administrations for a long time, that we need to finally, you know, come to grips with the fact that the expectation here and the need is that we have to lean into the hard stuff. We've got to do the stuff that hasn't been done before and not buy into the fact that people say you can't do that. So a lot of what we've been doing is changing ordinances and laws in order to affect certain things. And I can go off on a tangent, but I don't want this to sound political, but it's all designed to, for want of a better way to say it, everything that we're doing right now is to invest our energies, money, and resources into making this a great place to live for the people who live here. And if we do that, and we do that effectively, it'll also be a great place for the rest of the world to want to come visit. But that's a part of what we can control. And that's where all of our energy is right now. And that means embracing new ideas and then acting upon it. So for what it's worth.
Yeah.
This is a wonderful time to hear that we're shifting from policy making to adaptation.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think everybody is very excited about that commitment. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, I promised you, Mr. Mayor, I would not ask you a COVID question, so I will ask Derek a COVID question.
I think you asked Derek to ask me a COVID question.
Sure, why not?
I thought well enough. You could ask me directly, but go ahead, ask.
Derek, question specifically for you, and others can chime in, but I want to start with Derek here. COVID, probably not our last pandemic. How will it specifically impact transportation? I mean, today, I think it was this morning, the newspaper had an article that bus ridership is back up to 60%. 60%. That is a far cry from where we've been.
Right.
So with your expertise on the transportation side, what does the crystal ball tell you?
It's a tough one. You know, as a transit guy, we think about this every day, right? And I think this has been one of those opportunities. Again, you never want to waste a good crisis, right? And as we've all been thinking about it, you know, what have we learned from all this? And I think the one thing that we've learned, and I keep repeating myself on it, is resiliency, right? How does transit become a part of this solution? You know, if you think about all of the elements of transit and how we've looking at it traditionally, you know, I think the mayor was right in saying that we have to think in a much more multimodal and multi-programmatic way when we start to make these investments. And I think George has kind of hit the nail on the head that you have to get the funding synergies in place, right? Most of our projects that we work on are built on a potpourri of investments, as you well know, whether it's state highway funds, the FAA, you know, community block grants. We need to cobble up a really comprehensive funding source to really make these projects happen. So as we think about what life will be looking like in the future, it's going to be transit will be definitely very different. And you know, I think as we think about you know, transit moving forward is about resiliency. It's about understanding that, you know, you can design for COVID and talk about social distancing all you want. The reality is our systems are going to be around for 50, 60 years. So what's next? We're going to have terrorism, cyber, bio, you name it. We're going to be, and not to bring all these things up, but we have to be thinking about the next crisis. And our systems will need to be a lot more robust. And, you know, in the airport world, in the intermodal world, you know, we have been really hammered. Yes, you know, we're seeing people come back. The reality is, you know, you're going to be coming back to a wasteland, and you'll see it in a lot of airports, you'll see it in a lot of transit facilities, which brings me back to the question of what is the future of transit? For one thing, you know, transit will be thinking a lot more about cleanliness, hygiene. That's no question for anybody. But we'll also be thinking about de-peaking our systems. You know, we talked a little bit earlier about how people are working differently. Maybe the new normal is trying to do a lot more with less. And that might mean that we don't have these traditional peaks. This idea of this morning rush, and we've all lived through it. You know, as a 5-year-old, I remember my father on Canal Street, you know, just getting off the off ramp. You guys all know that experience, right? Getting past the Museum of Art. I vividly remember they were saying, you know, we've been here for half an hour. We may have made it through a quarter mile, right? You know, I think we really need to fundamentally think in these big urban centers, what does the morning and the afternoon rush mean? Pauhana might be very different, and people are going to be working in a very different way. The reality is we don't have the funds to build bigger tomorrow. We want to think bigger. And I think it goes back to this idea of courage. How do employers think about new transit patterns? How do we think about how everyone works? I mean, our airports may never be the same again. We talk about business travel. Are we looking at a very different way of doing business? Will we see business travel decline? Revenge travel gets sustained. And so all of these sort of new patterns need to be serviced by our transit systems. So I think, and the last thing I would say is that I think transit will forever be touch-free. It'll be high-tech, touch-free. And I think that's where our world is going. And we are involved in numerous projects where we are trying to find that balance between people who don't use technology. And how do we sort of find that middle ground? Because technology is great, right? But it's an enabler, and it's as good as it can be. But the reality is, we need to understand that when you talk about equity, you talk about these transportation experiences. We need to completely rethink our paradigm. So there's a lot for us to be thinking about post-pandemic.
Thank you, Derek. Well, that was a lot, and you touched on one thing that I want to pick up and ask Daniel, and that is how the way we work currently is changing, and what impact that might have on a city core. So Daniel, with remote working and other changes along those lines, more than likely, how do you think cities will respond?
Yeah, no, I mean, it certainly have changed a lot, and our relationship to each other and our loved ones as well, sharing your bedroom and having conference calls all day. But I see, like, I think it's interesting to see how the role of the public and shared spaces have, in a way, completely changed. And I think Derek touched on this, but the fact that we're traveling in completely different ways, and we are now suddenly, like, our local neighborhood and the functions and amenities in our local neighborhood becomes so much more important than they ever have been before. So kind of coming back to my earlier comment about kind of how we programming and how we create, how the interface between the public and the private becomes something that connects the city rather than breaking it up. So I think that's something that we will see. And then, of course, the streets, and coming back to the shared streets, I think it's like fantastic how, suddenly programming of a street is almost like a completely new expertise. It's a new field, because no one have programmed a street beyond thinking about trees, parking, and in best case scenario, a bicycle lane. But suddenly you have people dining and you have people playing sports in the middle of the street. So I think the whole kind of fabric is suddenly up for grabs to design and explore new functions and new ways of using the city. Almost this idea of the urban living room. So yeah, no, I to your point about working, I do think everything is obviously will be more kind of blurred and mixed, and people will be working in different locations. And I think you don't necessarily miss the workplace, but you do miss the human interaction, right? So yeah, I just see all these opportunities, and especially in the public space, and especially thinking about amenities, semi-public, private amenities. People can use spaces in buildings. So that's where I really see a lot of innovation, and hope that we will, in the near future, have a more accessible and more kind of active and more living city.
Yes. Wow.
Thank you. And that opens it up so wide for you, Georgia. I don't know if you just want to jump in
Oh,
here.
yeah. I'm already going there. I've got my Jetson bubble plane planned, and Derek's going to help me build it.
And how does, and as you answer but how does art fit into the city of the future? I think Daniel,
it's a great extension.
Opened that door.
Yes, totally, Bettina. You did. Thank you, Daniel. And I think to underscore adaptability is that the ability to plan in collaboration with community is so, I think, new to a lot of government and private sector entities. And it's absolutely what we have to embrace. And imagine if, the big what if, we had, Kapuna from community helping us design these streets, because that need is very different than kids on skateboards. Yet they both have to coexist if we are going to be more regionally as a hub and more. It's very important that community. It's a living, breathing thing now, as opposed to going to, no offense, Costco, but, to big box stores and drive on the freeway to get there. I see this as a return to like almost my growing up in Hollywood in the 50s, where everything was within walking distance, whether it's Brooklyn or Hollywood, any big city, you have that ability. We have it in spades, certainly in Honolulu proper, as well as all the communities that are regional to the city and county and all of our neighbor islands. So one of the things that does really resonate, though, with the future is the integration of art, whether it be public art or whether it be art for art's sake, in the sense that adaptive reuse of facilities that then can become art galleries. We have very few independent gallery spaces, other than, of course, the Downtown Arts Center, that can exhibit works that are from local artisans. And all that needs to be connected through technology, through an app, so that people that visit can actually buy their work through a simple click through on a app on your phone. But I do feel that without art, look at some of the most amazing places. In the classical sense, Italy and hubs, of course, around the world that, you can walk up and really look at a Da Vinci sculpture, right? And just be blown away. But we do the same thing with the capability of artists here that are doing wonderful works in many different ways, designers, fashion. All of it is part of how we think, live, and breathe in our communities. So I think the creative economy underscores the need to elevate the importance of that. And I think, Bettina, from programs like this and other talking sessions and listening sessions, are important, so that we find a way to build that bridge between government, private sector, and the local communities to design for our future in the way we'd like to see it.
Awesome. And art is here to stay, and that makes my European heart sing.
Yeah, look at Bauhaus, for heaven's sake. Come on, it's very important. And, I remember early on, just real quickly, I had the opportunity to go to free art classes in my community in LA, and it was at a Frank Lloyd Wright house. It was unbelievable. Barnstall Junior Art Center, and those kind of things are so important. I think that we have many global attractions here, especially the celebration of these wonderful, what used to be the biennial, for example, and now how that's taken off, really making Honolulu quite an important hub for all kinds of forward-thinking arts, whether it's visual or interactive.
Yep.
Yeah. George, you might find it surprising. I'm sorry, but you might find it surprising. We've got a lot of support in that direction, in a real thrust, if you will. I see Honolulu as a creative city. We're putting a lot of juice into it. You mentioned powwow. We've met with Melody and met with Jasper. In fact, we've just finally gotten Jasper Wong authorized to finally paint some places. We had to overcome
wonderful.
To get more outdoor art. I go on and on, but I would tell you that I really believe very strongly that part of the enrichment of our city on a going forward basis is to be very supportive. In fact, we're in negotiations on right now what we want to do with the Downtown Arts Center and opening up that to more artists and so on. But I know what a resource you are. I just want you to know, and I'm sorry, Bettina, but
That's good.
I want this minute to go by without letting you know that this city, our administration is going to be very strong in that area. So,
well, that we're thrilled and we're so excited to be working with them, and we love Makanani and the team at OER. So
yeah,
thrilled.
It is
Thrilled.
It is wonderful to hear that here. Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, I do have a question for you, two parts. What's the best thing in our city today? And if you could make one thing happen in the next 12 months, what would that be?
Yeah, that's a great, it's a great question. I mean, I just cited some of the things that are innovations or whatever. I would tell you, I have a hard time sometimes focusing on one thing. To me, I feel like I'm juggling a bunch of glass balls, okay, given the array of things we've walked into, and you don't want to let any of them drop. I would tell you that, on a going forward basis, knowing that when I talk about what's exciting, I think that, I'm a strong proponent of making sure we, despite all of our innovation, everything else we're talking about that's new and different and better, that we somehow, some way retain Hawaii's unique culture. And anything and everything we do, I want to be sure that we do that while we evolve into further efforts of the 21st century. So I think what I'm feeling right now, and again, we've been in office for 7 months in the midst of fear and uncertainty and trying to create hope in our people, is maybe perhaps that sense. I think I said earlier, I was on the calls today, a number of them on the whole COVID issue of where we are. Just so you know, the state and city today mandated vaccinations and what we're going to do on a going forward basis. I think there's going to be a domino effect. And what I've talked with recently, a lot of the major business leaders, is they just were hoping we would take the initiative. We have. I think we'll see some of that. But so I think what's the greatest thing happening, what I'm hoping for, even though I think it's going to take a long time to rebuild our economy, is this reemergence, if you will, of leaving the fear and uncertainty and getting into a place of feeling hope. I mean, for me, my journey as mayor is to walk in when it was fearful and uncertain, to create hope, and then leave a confident people. And that journey is what our team is all about. And so I would tell you that the emergence, if you will, of people coming out of this pandemic, for me, and I realize we're not talking about things and whatever, it's more about the human spirit and stopping the defection of people leaving here. For 5 straight years, Honolulu's had negative decline in growth, and trying to find opportunity. I think it's that. I think it's tying into the incredible potential and beauty of this place and the opportunity it presents, and making it real and keeping people here and giving people a reason to want to stay here and a hope and a belief in the future. I look at it from that standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Our city is in good hands. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, it is 4:30. I have, almost. I have been asked to take a little bit of a break at 4:30 and check the chat, which I haven't done, but I see there are comments. Are there any questions in there that we should start to respond to by now, or should I just keep on going? Oh, I take this as a license to keep on going. But everybody that is out there, please put your questions in now. We can, there's one. How do city planners and policymakers ensure the fruits of progress are shared equitable in the city of the future? You might wish I had stuck to my script. That's a tough one. Who would like to? Who would like to?
Well, let me
say
from our end, one of the things we've thought a lot about and talked a lot about has had to do with equity and making sure. I already alluded to the fact that we're going to invest in broadband for the West Side, but there's a lot of other things, not just with the real project, but we're very aware of, candidly speaking, how that side of the island has been really neglected in a lot of ways. We've got major issues coming up in the selection of a landfill for the future, where we're going to put that. There's just a lot of things. So I would tell you, on just the rent utility relief program that we've done very well in, and I'm very proud of that. In fact, Honolulu was ranked #1 city in the country in our ability to administer funds. And so we've already given out $47 million. And I'm proud of that, because, not denigrating the prior administration, we learned a lot of lessons from them. But a year, when they got the original CARES Act money, it took them 5 months to get out $1 million. We're giving $1.5 million out today, every day. And so that said, I look at the mapping, and before, even though it took them all that time, everything was disproportionate on the east side. They couldn't get by the technology and the language barriers of the west side, because there's some real deficiencies there and challenges. And we were able to do that. If I look at the equity, if I look at the mapping of the distribution of those funds. So I can only tell you that as we look at things going forward, we're putting a really emphasis on that things are just not here in the urban core in Honolulu centric, and that it is the city and county. And we got into the climate change issues and the things affecting the North Shore and other parts of our island. We're paying a lot of attention to that. So I just would tell you that's not lost on us.
And I think from the state government perspective, Governor Ige is extremely committed, as you all know, to digital equity, and that is a huge part of Hawaii 2.0. Those just sound like words, but they are absolutely grounded in very tangible projects that I think you will see the need, and also with policymakers, our legislature. I think that this is a collaborative effort that has maybe never been seen before. And I think that what's great about it is that it comes from the community through, like Bert Lemon, our department heading up the broadband initiative, to our leadership in the state. So one example I can give you is the Nanakuli Library, the project that we're working on there, which is very grounded, as we all talked about, and Mayor highlighted, about honoring the culture first. And it is about marrying technology and culture, agriculture, and self-sustainability in a project that we are partnering also with the Department of Hawaiian Homeland Science.
Awesome. Daniel, I'm curious, from your perspective, what do you think? Can you add anything about how planners and policymakers ensure that it's equitable?
No, but I mean, obviously, coming from a design point of view, I think coming back to some of the conversations we had earlier regarding a mixed-use city and a mixed-income neighborhoods, and making sure that you don't create enclaves of certain type of building, certain type of environments. So I think the resiliency, in a way, is about creating a city for all. And I think that component is critical to address a lot of these challenges. And I mean, I don't have the answer, but we have experimented a lot with thinking about inserting public buildings in neighborhoods, making sure that you have public-private public space that people can enjoy, and really making sure that the scale of developments allow for a great deal of mix within. And I think this idea of big money and small money kind of sharing the same space is something that I think is critical to kind of create that successful dynamic and kind of synergies that we somehow need to do. So perhaps a little bit abstract, but it's a difficult question.
No, that's a great answer. And there's a follow-up to a degree question here that is asking, as future cities become more technology-based and smart in a way, I guess. How do you ensure that level of technology is adopted by all residents, regardless of age and income level? I think it's the next step of what we just discussed, and I'm not sure whether there is a easy answer to this, because my 16-year-old daughter believes I was born when the dinosaurs roamed the face of this earth, and that I will never figure out certain things that she does within seconds on whatever electronic device. But I think that is a very important question, because we talk about well-functioning infrastructure, and accessibility to all is a part of that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Absolutely. I did want to add to that observation. I think when you look at technology, Bettina, I think that I do have a fear that we are starting to accept that technology is an end all. And I see technology as an enabler. When we think about all of the soft infrastructure in our built environment, we can use technology in a very compelling way, whether it be dynamic sensing to, obviously manage our intelligent transportation systems, or, going back to the Wi-Fi question, which coupled with a lot of great programs, educational programs to reinforce basically digital literacy, it can be transformative. And I think technology is going to be the level setting that every successful city needs to know how to manage. It's not so much being afraid of it, but it's really when you think about, we're working in Ontario, in the Greater Toronto area, where we are reinventing the car. We're thinking about, what is the future of embracing electric vehicles, not running away from cars, but recognizing that people still like suburban tracks. They still want to do a lot of things, but there are communities that are completely off the grid. There are cars that can be stacked. There can be cars that can be put, in very interesting places where we can give back these open spaces that we've been talking about. So technology is something that we need to have the political courage to harness, and also the innovation, right? And that sort of, cultivation of a lot of players who can come together and really leverage that technology. Unfortunately, technology isn't free. So this is where policy makers and shapers need to be strong about how do we do this to protect our civil liberties, to really understand that it can only be as smart as all of you policymakers here can make it. And so we've got to be careful how we manage this domain, particularly in this era of cyber terrorism. I think we just need to really kind of pick our battles. And we think that technology can also be this incredible level set tool for how do you kind of rethink our traditional infrastructure. We've been working with BMW to rethink the gas station. In this sort of world of cyber and hybrid and interesting ways of running a electric future, there is a future for the gas station. It's just not what you think of it today.
Exactly right.
I think there's a lot of ways we can harness it, but we just got to be really, really careful on how we manage that to maintain that equity.
You piqued our interest now. What is the future of the gas station?
And it's not a convenience store.
There is a lot going on. If you think about where it's headed, we have people who are working very differently now. We've been talking about changing work patterns. We've also been thinking about in an all-electric world, will we need to start thinking about how do we manipulate these cars and how do we manage them? Right? Do we start to use gas stations to stack and charge? Do we start to, these are all brownfields, right? So let's take advantage of these sites and get really smart, about how do we double down and be particularly opportunistic about not ripping things out and spending all that money to redo it, but to reactivate it, make it cleaner and bring it back in a much better fashion than when we found it. So I think there's a lot of things that are, obviously this is all work in progress, but I do think that the gas stations of the future, as everyone is working on it, is going to be clean. It's going to be invigorating, and it's going to be a nice place of respite. We've been thinking about, do people need to actually meet as groups? And do people in the neighborhood say, you know what, I'm not going to the office, but I will see you 3 blocks out there. And it might be even a community center after hours too. So there are lots of different ways.
Exactly right. And a great art space on top of it.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Completely net zero.
It completely net zero. Can I just add to that other comment that came from our viewers that, one very important thing about having technology drive our lives is the ability to not freak out when it's not there. And so, if electricity goes away or we can't power our electric cars, then what? So there's that. But in a very pragmatic way, if you look at the population, the graying population of Hawaii in general, and you look at how older citizens, particularly Kupuna on homestead land or other places that really are resistant to embracing technology, yet they want to make sure that their stories for their grandchildren are told. So one of the things that we're floating as an idea is partnering with the area schools, Nanakuli, Waianae, for example, who have vibrant digital media programs, and having those young people, maybe some of them just around the age of Bettina's daughter, work with older citizens in the community to either help them learn it or facilitate what they want to do. So it's through an osmosis process, not like a hammer. And I think that is going to be a good pilot project for us to test, to see then how can we empower regionally our schools to work with Kupuna in the community. And that is an important equity aspect of the entire 2.0.
This is a really interesting comment that you just made as we were talking earlier about the way that the office environment and how we work is changing. Our firm, we're 5 generations in an open, well, we're still 5 generations, but we were in an open office environment. And some of the beauty in that was exactly what you just described. We learned from each other.
Yes.
The age groups are all mixed up, and one learning is not one directional ever. It is always both ways, and that is something else we're losing right now.
Yes, agreed. That's why I think even the reshaping of co-work, even though we thought maybe, now the co-work trend is over, oh Lord, I don't think it is. I think exactly what you said, Bettina, mixing those communities together in ways that help one another. And that's a big part of the city of the future.
There's one question here that I'm not entirely sure I'm interpreting correctly, but I will throw it out there. What can be done to ensure that Hawaii artists, Hawaii designers, Hawaii creatives do work in Hawaii? I think there's tremendous talent, and we all love our friends at Big and Gensler. But what can be done that our local talent has at least an equal part in shaping
Very good.
the future of our environment? I know I'm not even sure if I interpreted this question right, but here we go. And who wants to tackle that one? And maybe Derek and Daniel, you can touch it, because this is probably not a unique, it's not a unique problem or issue to Hawaii. you may see your own versions in your areas.
I'll take a crack at this because this is obviously an issue that we all face, right? As global practitioners, our firm has 49 offices around the world, so we are, in many ways, as much as we claim we are a global firm with over 5,000 people, we are also important local players in our neighborhoods. I'm a member of my economic development advisory board. I work on a lot of nonprofit projects for the Boys and Girls Club. These are our communities. So when we go to other places, we start by asking our clients, what are your values? What are your priorities? What do you want? We offer expertise in many sort of building types. We can help certainly as experts, but experts coming into other neighborhoods and other areas really need to be thoughtful, about how do you blend that expertise with a very cognizant knowledge that there are people here, everyone's watching, there's a process, and we typically find pretty early on who we want to work with, whether it be an artist or it be local practitioners who can help us define our roles. Our roles are not always defined de facto. I think we need to be cautious of how we contribute. So in some places we're experts. Other places we are the local architect partnering with someone else. And I think, Bettina, you're probably the master when it comes to finding and striking those balances as a local practitioner, bringing in expertise. So I think it really varies, but I think to the question of how do you bring creatives, to be responsible for public works in its entirety is sometimes not necessarily what the RFP writer is looking for. Sometimes people are looking for something slightly different that might change the conversation. And it all varies by RFP. So anyway, I'll stop there.
No, this is great, and I do thank you for your kind words. Daniel, you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, maybe I interpreted the question a little bit different, but I see it coming back to this idea that it's like you don't go from a pencil to the Louvre in France. There is like a lot of steps on the way, and I think what the kind of opportunity the great communities have is to provide that kind of small steps on the way and helping people getting to where they want to be. So I think making sure that you have kind of the different scales of opportunities on the way. And I think perhaps coming from Sweden is a big part of the success behind a lot of musicians, for example, that you do have a very kind of strong presence or a presence of music in school and in university and in colleges. And you have that kind of opportunity all along the way to join that kind of a movement. So yeah, no, I really see that kind of making sure that ecosystem is there. But then of course also another aspect of it is I think like great communities are also places that other people love to visit, other people love to come to, and mixing up ideas and making sure that you have that kind of vibrancy and have that become a destination for others to come in and share perhaps different thoughts and different ideas. So I mean, it's a complex subject, but a good one.
Oh, yeah.
Both handled it well, I think. I would like to add to the conversation about it because it is something that I think with the over 54,000 individuals within the state of Hawaii that are in the creative sectors or creative economy. It really defines who we are, mostly entrepreneurial, small businesses, not big businesses, although we do count architecture and other larger firms as part of this ecosystem. And one of our charges at Creative Industries was to harness the idea of, first of all, how do we get all this talent ready to work in a business framework when business isn't taught in art in our schools, okay? It's not taught in art, music, filmmaking, or anything, which is why we launched Creative Lab Hawaii. And Creative Lab Hawaii is a project which really brings the business acumen to a higher level, hones the craft, and gets them ready to be in front of designers like yourselves, or to work with someone who has received an RFP. Maybe their artists aren't going for the RFP, but that's request for proposal, in case anyone wants to know what the heck that means. But basically what this is really a training ground. Like in baseball, it'd be like a minor league kind of, summer camp. And that's what we're doing. We've seen great success in it. So the Creative Lab model of entrepreneurship development, honing your skills, and access to the people that can hire you is very important. The key thing for creatives here in Hawaii, especially because we have had a terrible history of this situation, is to protect your intellectual property. And the ways to do that are to attend many of our weekend boot camps that we offer, as well as some of the other more extended programs. And the new ones that we'll be launching will be for visual artists. And we hope to be partnering with the city and county on that as we roll out our FY 22-23 season of Creative Lab Hawaii. So I do feel that it's critical. The last thing I'll say is that we do feel that Hawaii needs a digital hub, if you will, a sort of Netflix hub that showcases the best and brightest of all of our creative sectors. And those people have a prerequisite to get on. They have had their, work licensed, has been copyrighted. So that's something in the future that we're planning, where we can not matchmake, but offer a door and a window into Hawaii's talent, and then have government get out of the way.
Perfect. So we're starting to go into our last 10 minutes, and I want to ask one last question that I think might be fun for everybody to answer. Daniel, you mentioned the High Line in New York City earlier, and art and nature transformed some of those neglected areas in our cities. Are there any areas in Honolulu that could be transformed? Okay, maybe Daniel, that is harder for you to answer. I don't know how long your visit to Hawaii was a couple of months ago, but
no, I've certainly been a couple of times, but yeah, I'll let someone else here answer that question.
There's probably opportunity everywhere. Go ahead.
Well,
yeah.
I'll tell you right now, I've looked at the KS plans for Kapalama 2045, 25 years from now. And if one were to think back 25 years ago, what Kakako looked like, and not just because of the huge things compared to today and the potential of that, Kapalama 2045, just 24 years from now, aided and abetted by rail transit, is part of the equation, but just in the development is going to be a totally different place of different kinds of affordable living too, not the high-rise situation of Kakako, but a very different plan with great community amenities. And I think that's going to be, I'm not going to have enough years to see it all happen, but it's going to be, I think, an amazing transformation when you consider the relative proximity to downtown Boston. And, Derek, for what it's worth, I was down on the waterfront a couple of years ago. I stayed at the Boston Harbor Hotel. I was back there for a meeting, and I looked at all those buildings in wonderment, because when I was a kid growing up, those were all factories and tenement houses, and I mean, anything, any antithetical to anything
Exactly.
you could even imagine what was there versus what's there
Exactly.
today. So I do think that we have some areas like that, along with some of the more rural aspects. But the Kapalama situation, again, which is part of the urban core, if you will, and our ability to create even some more density and height and whatever, but also just the overall plan, I think is going to be a major transformation project for Honolulu in the years to come. Major.
Right.
And we're gonna help give birth to that as well, because it has to happen.
And our TOD plan is part of that vision, and we're seeing some of this, and it is quite wonderful. Yes. Thank you.
Speaking of TOD, I just did want to chime in, Bettina, that I think when you leave the airport, your impression of Honolulu is a very interesting one. And I think this is one of those really, really kind of interesting opportunities. And I'm inspired by the homeless encampments. You know, every time I come home, it's obviously been 19 months since I've been last home. But I do think that there is a very interesting creative tension there and opportunity in how we think about inclusivity, we think about affordability, and we think about urban energy as you extend that airport into that strip of Nimitz. Has this incredible sort of redevelopment that is adaptive reuse. It's about tapping into the desires of transportation hubs are becoming microgrids, right? They're becoming their own energy source. They're becoming a respite during COVID, during the next pandemic. These conditions, airports cannot be islands, right? As we connect to communities like the homeless encampments and all that, I think it's an incredible urban design challenge to think about how do we balance those needs? What is that first impression of Honolulu going to be like? And I think that's just a really incredible, that could be a design competition. You may not be able to change it overnight. And it's not about ripping things out and building new stuff. It's how do we take that infrastructure? And as we think about this adaptive reuse opportunity we've been talking about, what could it look like? What's that connectivity? And I think it's something that I would love to see someone think about.
It sounds as if you are already thinking about that. And I think anybody that has come from the airport, wonders.
Within the airport, even within the airport experience, the minute you get off the plane, I think that, you get off the plane in places like Nashville, and they celebrate the music of that place. Why don't we have that? It's the most important defining aspect and export of our entire state, and differentiates us from any other sand and surf destination, the culture and the music and arts. So I'm sure that has been in the plan. I'm not, discounting that DOT already has that in mind. Very forward-thinking people like Ed Smith in there. So I do feel that there are, he's with highways, but I do feel that that's an important aspect of showcasing our artists as well as our performing artists in that aspect of our community. This should be a great competition.
Involves a lot of different talents. Yeah, it would be lovely. And we do have the talent locally. I know there are some comments in the chat about that, but there's lots of opportunity. I think that is what I'm taking out of this. Okay, we are at 4:57. I want to take this time now to thank this absolutely incredible panel. And I hope that all of you joining us tonight enjoyed it just as much. As I mentioned earlier, we are happy to send out the recording of this. It's been a fantastic panel, incredibly interesting discussion, and we are in very visionary, wonderful hands. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Derek and Daniel, you're on the East Coast, and it is now Oh, very late. We really, really appreciate this. And Georgia, it's been such a pleasure to have you part of this. I want to thank you all very much.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Bettina.
Thank you. It's been
It was an honor.
fantastic. Let's make some action plans.
I think there were a lot of great ideas that came out of this, and I took a lot of notes. A lot of people heard this discussion. I think this can be the start of some change, and it's been invigorating to me personally, and I do want to thank you for that.
Thank you for your leadership, Bettina.
Yes, thank you all. It's inspiring.
It's a team. Be well and stay safe. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Aloha.
Take care.